August 25, 1944. Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. Private Emanuel Green of the 3214th Quartermaster Service Company stood beside his GMC Jimmy truck, watching the convoy staging area transform into something that would reshape German strategic calculations. Through the morning haze, he counted row after row of identical trucks, their engines idling in mechanical chorus, drivers climbing into cabs, preparing for a mission that would prove German military doctrine catastrophically wrong. "We thought supply lines were Germany's advantage," Green would later write in his diary. "We had no idea what American industry could accomplish at this scale." If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Around him, 3,558 trucks prepared to roll eastward on this inaugural day. Most drivers were young African-American soldiers, barely past their teenage years, pressed into service from artillery units, infantry reserves, support battalions. Few had driven trucks larger than family cars. Some from rural backgrounds or inner cities had never driven at all. Yet these inexperienced men were about to operate the most ambitious logistics system in military history, a system that would mathematically prove the impossibility of German victory through simple arithmetic. The Germans called their Eastern Offensive Blitzkrieg, lightning war, the tactical doctrine that conquered Poland in weeks, France in months, pushed deep into Russia on mechanized thrust and tactical brilliance. German propaganda celebrated panzer divisions racing across landscapes, dive bombers screaming from cloudless skies, the modern face of mechanized warfare. The world believed Germany had mastered industrial combat. What none of them knew, what German intelligence would discover through captured supply documents over the following months, was that America was about to demonstrate logistics capacity that made German achievements look primitive. The mathematics were about to speak with brutal clarity. Industrial democracy would prove superior to fascist militarism, not through courage or tactical skill, but through the unglamorous reality of ton-miles delivered per day. The crisis had begun exactly 1 month earlier. On July 25, 1944, General Omar Bradley's First Army launched Operation Cobra, breaking through Normandy hedgerows after nearly 8 weeks of grinding attrition warfare. The breakthrough released something unprecedented. Lieutenant General George Patton's Third Army became operational on August 1st and erupted across the French countryside at speeds that exceeded every historical precedent for sustained offensive movement. Patton's armour covered 75 miles in single days. The German 7th Army collapsed. By mid-August, Allied forces had encircled German positions at the Falaise Pocket, eliminating approximately 50,000 enemy soldiers, leaving another 10,000 dead. The road to Paris lay open. The German border beckoned beyond. But victory created its own crisis, one that would test whether American logistics could sustain what American arms had achieved. The Allied advance had outrun every pre-invasion projection. Each American division in combat operations consumed approximately 750 tons of supplies daily, everything from ammunition and fuel to rations and medical supplies. With 28 divisions pushing eastward simultaneously, daily requirements approached 21,000 tons. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. The pre-invasion bombing campaign that crippled German reinforcement capabilities had also devastated French infrastructure. Allied bombers had methodically destroyed every major rail line in northern France to prevent German counterattacks. The strategy succeeded militarily but created logistical nightmare. Traditional supply methods could not function. The major French ports remained in German hands. Cherbourg had been captured, but German demolitions rendered it nearly useless until late September. The port of Antwerp, captured on September 4th, would not open for shipping until November 28th. Every ton of supplies still came across Normandy beaches through makeshift Mulberry harbours, artificial ports towed from England and assembled in the Channel. By late June, these innovative structures had unloaded 170,000 vehicles, 7.5 million gallons of fuel, 500,000 tons of supplies. The system worked, but could not keep pace with Patton's advance. Distance created the fundamental problem. Each mile eastward added 2 miles to supply runs, 1 mile loaded, 1 mile returning empty. The supply line was consuming itself through movement. The solution emerged from a 36-hour brainstorming session in late August, involving Colonel Lorin Albert Ayers, known to his men as Little Patton, and Major Gordon Gravel. These Transportation Corps officers faced unprecedented challenge. They needed to move massive tonnages over distances exceeding anything American logistics had previously attempted, using roads not designed for heavy military traffic, through country still partially occupied by German forces. The solution they devised borrowed terminology from American railroad practice. Since the 1890s, Santa Fe Railroad had marked priority express shipments with red balls painted on freight car sides. Around 1892, the railroad began using this designation for perishable goods and priority freight needing immediate transport. By the 1920s, red ball designation indicated fastest, highest priority cargo throughout American railroads. Trains carrying red ball freight received absolute priority. All traffic cleared for their passage would be applied to trucks on an unprecedented scale. Colonel Ayers and Major Gravel designed a one-way loop system. 2 parallel routes would connect Normandy supply dumps to forward logistics bases near Chartres, approximately 125 miles inland. The northern route would carry loaded trucks eastward. The southern route would carry empty trucks back to the coast. Both routes would be closed to all civilian traffic and have absolute priority over all other military movements. Military police would control every intersection. No convoy would stop for anything except mechanical failure or enemy action. The plan required assembling massive truck fleet in record time. 132 existing Transportation Corps truck companies were consolidated into single mammoth operation. The primary vehicle was the GMC CCKW, a 2.5-ton 6-wheel drive truck, universally known as the Jimmy or the Deuce and a Half. General Motors had designed this workhorse in 1940 and began serious production in February 1941. Over 560,000 would be manufactured before production ended in 1945, making it the second most produced American military vehicle after the Jeep. The CCKW designation came from GM's naming convention. C indicated the 1941 model year. The second C designated conventional cab configuration. K meant all-wheel drive with powered front axle. W indicated twin dual-wheel rear axles. The name Jimmy came from soldiers' pronunciation of GMC letters. The Deuce and a Half referred to its 2.5-ton payload capacity. The truck featured a GMC 270 engine, an overhead valve inline 6 producing 91.5 horsepower in early models, later versions generating 104 horsepower at 2,750 revolutions per minute. The engine delivered 216 pound-feet of torque at 1,400 RPM. This gasoline engine, originally designed for commercial trucks, proved remarkably reliable in military service. The 3.5-inch bore combined with 4-inch stroke created displacement of 269.5 cubic inches. Power flowed through Warner T93 5-speed transmission. Fourth gear was direct drive. Fifth was overdrive, allowing the truck to maintain highway speeds while conserving fuel. Early CCKWs featured closed metal cabs from GM's commercial truck line. By July 1943, production switched to open cabs with canvas roofs and doors. This design change served multiple purposes. It simplified manufacturing when every hour counted. It reduced shipping height, allowing more trucks to fit on cargo vessels. It improved ventilation in hot climates. It increased visibility for drivers navigating crowded roads and dangerous terrain. Standard cargo beds measured 12 feet long. Early beds used steel construction. As steel became increasingly rationed for armor plate and ship construction, wooden beds replaced them. These proved unsatisfactory, warping under load and weather. A composite design emerged, combining steel sides and framing with wooden bottom slats. This hybrid approach provided strength where needed while conserving strategic materials. Finding drivers proved more challenging than assembling trucks. The Transportation Corps needed 23,000 drivers and mechanics immediately. Many would come from other units whose duties were not immediately critical. Able-bodied soldiers found themselves reassigned overnight. Artillerymen became truck drivers. Infantry reserves transformed into convoy operators. Most received minimal truck driving instruction. Many had never driven anything larger than family car. Some, coming from rural backgrounds or inner cities, had never driven at all. They would learn through necessity, through trial and error, through informal knowledge shared between exhausted men, trying to keep vehicles moving. The peculiarities of military logistics and American racism converged to create the composition of the Red Ball Express. Approximately 75% of Red Ball drivers were African American soldiers. This resulted directly from segregation policies that pervaded the American military in 1944. Military doctrine held, without any factual basis, that black soldiers lacked intelligence and courage for combat roles. Consequently, African Americans were systematically assigned to service and support units, working as truck drivers, quartermaster personnel, engineers, port battalion laborers. This racist policy would inadvertently create one of the war's most critical and celebrated operations. Private James Rucard of Maple Heights, Ohio, was 19 years old when assigned to the Red Ball Express. He had been drafted in March 1943 and sent to Company C, 514th Quartermaster Regiment. Staff Sergeant Chester Jones, with the 3418th Trucking Company, had similar experiences. Ernest Myers, of the 3214th Quartermaster Service Company, articulated what many felt. "We wanted to make an impression for the people back home. We wanted to show that black men were combat ready." These young men, mostly under 24 years old, suddenly bore responsibility for sustaining entire armies. They understood the weight of that responsibility and the opportunity to prove themselves that had been denied in combat roles. What they could not know was that their success would provide German intelligence with mathematical proof of Allied industrial superiority, so overwhelming that victory became impossible for the Reich. The Red Ball Express launched on Friday, August 25, 1944, with 67 truck companies. 3,558 trucks, mostly jimmies, hauled 4,482 tons of time. Supplies on the inaugural run. The convoy rolled out from staging areas near Saint-Lô, heading eastward on dedicated routes toward the Chartres-Dreux area, where forward supply depots had been established to feed American armies racing toward the Seine. Just 4 days later, on August 29th, the operation had expanded dramatically. 132 truck companies now participated, operating 5,958 vehicles that carried 12,342 tons in a single day, setting the single-day record that would never be exceeded during the operation's 83-day lifetime. Official regulations were strict and sensible. Trucks would travel in convoys of at least 5 vehicles, escorted by jeeps in front and rear. Drivers must maintain 60-yard intervals to prevent single enemy bomb or strafing run from destroying multiple vehicles. Maximum speed was set at 25 miles per hour for safe operation on narrow French roads. Passing was forbidden to maintain convoy integrity. During night operations, trucks operated under blackout conditions using cat-eye headlight covers that emitted only tiny slits of light, enough to mark their presence but not enough to attract German aircraft. Reality quickly diverged from regulations. The urgency of the mission and the personality of the drivers created very different operation. Veteran mechanic Fred Ree, serving in an ambulance unit, remembered them vividly. "Oh boy, do I remember that Red Ball gang. They were a hell of a crew. They used to carry ammunition boxes twice as high as the top of the truck, and when they went down the highway, they swayed back and forth. Those guys were crazy, like they were getting paid for every run." Drivers immediately began removing engine governors that limited trucks to 56 miles per hour. These governors sapped power on hills and prevented maintaining steady high speeds on straightaways. Drivers slapped the governors back on for inspections, then removed them again for actual runs. Speed became everything. Individual trucks routinely ignored the convoy system, departing Cherbourg as soon as they were loaded, rather than waiting for escort jeeps. Drivers pushed their jimmies to 60 miles per hour and beyond, racing through French villages and countryside. They developed motto borrowed from French, tout de suite, meaning immediately, right now. This became operational philosophy. Get loaded, get moving, get there, get back, do it again. The convoys ran 24 hours daily. Drivers worked in two-man teams sharing single truck. One man drove while the other tried to sleep in the passenger seat, an exercise in futility given rough roads and constant motion. After 2 hours, they switched positions. The round trip from Normandy to Chartres and back took 54 hours of continuous operation. Meanwhile, in Berlin, German intelligence officers were beginning to receive troubling reports from multiple sources. Prisoner interrogations from captured German soldiers in France and Italy contained remarkably consistent accounts. Every interrogated prisoner described American supply abundance that seemed wasteful by German standards. They spoke of entire meals being thrown away because soldiers disliked the taste. They described American vehicles being abandoned after minor mechanical problems because it was easier to requisition new one than repair the old. They recounted seeing supply dumps larger than anything in German army, containing food, ammunition, fuel, equipment in quantities that appeared unlimited. Some accounts seemed so extreme that interrogators initially suspected exaggeration or Allied propaganda, but consistency across hundreds of independent interrogations made dismissal impossible. Officers and enlisted men, paratroopers and infantry, tank crews and artillerymen all told same stories of overwhelming American material superiority. More significantly, these accounts matched what German forces were experiencing on other fronts. In Sicily, captured in July and August 1943, German forces encountered similar patterns. In Italy, where Allied forces landed in September 1943, the pattern repeated. Everywhere German forces engaged Americans, they found enemies with seemingly unlimited supplies. Then captured documents began arriving in Berlin in greater numbers, and these could not be dismissed as subjective impressions. Unlike prisoner accounts, supply documents were clinical, bureaucratic, undeniable. They were not meant to impress or intimidate. They were simply routine paperwork of American military logistics, mundane forms that tracked supplies through military distribution system, and the numbers they contained would prove apocalyptic for German strategic planning. The contrast with German logistics was stark and devastating. While American trucks raced at breakneck speeds, the vaunted Wehrmacht still depended heavily on horses. This shocking reality contradicted German propaganda and Allied perceptions. The Blitzkrieg created an image of total German mechanization, panzer columns racing across landscapes while dive bombers screamed overhead. But it was largely illusion, a facade maintained by careful propaganda photography that showed Germany's most modern units while hiding the horse-drawn reality of most formations. German armoured and motorized divisions constituted only a small fraction of the Wehrmacht. The vast majority of German units moved on foot or with horse-drawn transport. The numbers told remarkable story that would have shattered Nazi propaganda had it been widely known during the war. Germany entered World War II with 514,000 horses. Over the course of the war, the Wehrmacht employed approximately 2.75 million horses and mules in total. At any given time during the war, approximately 1.1 million horses served in German military operations. This exceeded the horse populations used by most armies in the First World War, supposedly the last major conflict before mechanization. A typical 1941 German infantry division included around 5,000 horses requiring 53 tons of hay and oats daily. These animals did not produce that fodder. They consumed it. Every ton of horse feed was ton that could not be ammunition, fuel for vehicles, or rations for soldiers. Horses had severe practical limitations that became increasingly apparent as war progressed. They could not operate more than 25 miles from railhead before fodder supplies began requiring more transport space than ammunition and weapons. Yet German infantry divisions during Operation Barbarossa routinely found themselves 90 miles from nearest railhead, creating impossible supply demands. The horses ate everything available. During one summer month in 1941 alone, German forces requisitioned 112 tons of oats and 768 tons of hay from Russian farms. Hungry horses gnawed wooden beams, tree trunks, even walls. They consumed cotton feed bags, leading to digestive problems. Roughage often arrived mouldy, causing illness. Horses died in enormous numbers that would have been catastrophic for mechanized force. 179,000 horses perished in December 1941 and January 1942 alone during the first Russian winter. More than the total number of tanks Germany produced during entire war. A German soldier wrote in his memoir that a curious odor would stick to Russian campaign. This mixture of fire, sweat, and horse corpses. The Wehrmacht's dependence on horses created catastrophic logistical limitations that directly impacted operational capabilities. Horse-drawn columns clogged roads that should have carried motorized supplies forward. Horses moved slowly, approximately 3 to 4 miles per hour under load, compared to trucks capable of 40 to 50 miles per hour. They required rest, feeding, grooming, and veterinary care that consumed manpower and time. They panicked under artillery fire, often stampeding and disrupting operations. German armoured spearheads repeatedly found themselves far ahead of their supporting infantry and supplies, creating dangerous gaps. The famous encirclements at Kiev, Vyazma, and Bryansk might have been even more devastating had German infantry been able to close pockets more rapidly. Instead, horse-drawn units struggled to keep pace with panzers, allowing thousands of Soviet soldiers to escape destruction. The contrast became vivid when German prisoners of war captured after D-Day watched American vehicles roll off landing craft. "Where are the horses?" they asked their guards, genuinely confused. They had never seen army operate without horses. They assumed the massive vehicle parks they observed must be supplemented by even larger numbers of horses, somewhere out of sight. The question revealed enormous gap between German logistics and American industrial capacity. The concept of all-mechanized army was literally incomprehensible to soldiers raised in military culture, where horses remained fundamental. The Red Ball Express operated in completely different realm, representing future of warfare in ways German planners had failed to anticipate. By August 29th, just 4 days after launch, the operation had expanded to 132 truck companies and 5,958 vehicles, the peak that would be maintained through September. At any given moment, approximately 900 trucks were on road simultaneously, running 24 hours per day without pause. The statistics became staggering. The Red Ball hauled 12,500 tons of supplies daily at its peak on August 29th. Over its 83-day operational lifetime from August 25th through November 16th, the Express transported 412,193 tons of fuel, ammunition, rations, and equipment. This single truck operation moved more tonnage in less than 3 months than entire German army groups could transport over similar distances in year of operations. The drivers worked under brutal conditions that tested human endurance. 2-man teams shared driving duties on round trips that consumed 54 hours of continuous movement. They drove through rain that turned French roads into rivers of mud. They navigated roads pocked with shell holes from recent combat. They skirted around destroyed vehicles, both Allied and German, that littered roadsides. They drove through areas where German forces had not been fully cleared, risking ambush and sniper fire. Private Emanuel Green recalled stepping over dead enemy soldiers when his unit reached forward delivery points. Combat had passed through these areas hours earlier, but clearing bodies remained incomplete. He witnessed non-commissioned officer in his company severely injured after triggering landmine near truck Green had been repairing. The NCO survived but lost his leg. Green later named his oldest son in honor of that man, ensuring the sacrifice would be remembered. Red Ball convoys also faced hijackers, who sought cargo for personal use or black market sales. Gasoline, cigarettes, and medical supplies commanded premium prices on black market. Stragglers became especially vulnerable to these criminals, who were sometimes Allied soldiers from other units, sometimes French civilians, and occasionally German infiltrators in American uniforms. The greatest natural enemy proved to be mud. French roads, never designed for thousands of heavy trucks carrying loads far exceeding peacetime standards, disintegrated under constant pounding. Rain turned unpaved sections into quagmires. Trucks bogged down axle deep, their 11-inch wheels unable to generate traction in the soup. Technical problems plagued operation despite Jimmy's reputation for reliability. Red Ball trucks were frequently brought to standstill by water in their gasoline, problem that stemmed from multiple sources. Proper maintenance required purging gas line filter between engine and cab regularly to remove accumulated water, but exhausted drivers running on minimal sleep often skipped this step to save time. Condensation was principal cause in normal circumstances, but sabotage added to problem in ways that enraged American personnel. German prisoners of war, aware through experience or training that water in gas was Achilles' heel of 6x6 design, were frequently used to load supplies and fuel trucks at rear area depots. More than one veteran remembered watching POWs deliberately dragging open jerry cans through snow and rain to contaminate gasoline before loading it onto trucks. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The drivers adapted through necessity and ingenuity. They became expert mechanics through trial and error and informal knowledge sharing. They learned to diagnose engine problems by sound alone, distinguishing between minor issues that could wait and major problems requiring immediate attention. They mastered quick repairs in darkness, working by feel when blackout conditions prevented using lights. The scale of American mechanization awed everyone who witnessed it, friend and foe alike. Germany's most capable mechanized force, the Panzer divisions that had swept across Europe between 1939 and 1942, numbered fewer than 30 divisions, out of more than 300 total Wehrmacht divisions. At war's peak, America fielded army where mechanization was not exception but standard that applied to every unit, regardless of type or mission. Every American infantry division had organic motor transport sufficient to move its entire complement of personnel and equipment. Every artillery piece was towed by truck or mounted on self-propelled chassis. Every supply line ran on rubber tires driven by internal combustion engines. The entire system assumed mobility at speeds impossible for horse-drawn forces. The Germans had nothing comparable in scale or sophistication. A 1943 German infantry division supply train employed 256 trucks and 2,652 horses, attended by 4,047 men. These numbers revealed fundamental contradiction in German military organization. The trucks could move faster and carry more, but they were outnumbered by horses more than 10 to 1. The horses limited entire divisions' movement to speed of slowest horse-drawn wagon, typically 3 to 4 miles per hour under load on good roads, less on poor roads or rough terrain. In contrast, a lean 1943 Soviet infantry division supply train, aided significantly by American Lend-Lease trucks, operated with just 91 trucks and 556 horses, attended by 879 men. The Soviets had fewer total vehicles than Germans, but understood fundamental principle that mobile force cannot be chained to immobile elements. The Wehrmacht was literally fighting World War II with logistics that belonged to previous century, reality masked by propaganda films showing panzer columns but never showing horse-drawn supply wagons struggling to keep up. German supply by horse and wagon meant armies could not move faster than walking speed for sustained periods. Armoured spearheads repeatedly outran their supplies, forcing halts that allowed enemies to regroup and establish new defensive lines. This limitation helped save Moscow in 1941, when German logistics collapsed under strain of distances and winter conditions. The Red Ball Express exposed these weaknesses mercilessly through direct comparison. American tanks and infantry advanced at previously impossible speeds because their logistics could keep pace through superior organization and overwhelming industrial capacity. Patton's Third Army covered 400 miles in less than a month during August 1944, advancing so rapidly that German forces could not establish coherent defensive lines. Towns that might have been defended fell without significant resistance because German reinforcements could not arrive in time. By late August, Patton had reached Meuse River. His spearheads crossed on August 31st, establishing bridgeheads that threatened to drive straight into Germany with minimal opposition. The German frontier lay within reach. Victory seemed imminent. Then the advance stopped, not from German resistance, but from American logistics reaching their absolute limit. On August 31st, 1944, Third Army ran out of gasoline near Moselle River, just outside Metz. The Red Ball Express, despite heroic efforts moving 12,000 tons daily, could not deliver enough fuel to sustain Patton's breakneck pace. Every gallon consumed by advancing tanks was gallon that had travelled 200 miles or more from Normandy beaches. The fuel crisis revealed both triumph and limitations of truck-based logistics operating at unprecedented scale and distance. An armoured division required 73,177 gallons of fuel to move 100 miles with all its vehicles fully loaded. With all vehicle tanks filled, division had 121,695 gallons aboard, giving theoretical range of 166 miles. In practice, divisions needed complete refueling daily during offensive operations. Fuel could not be wished into existence or conjured from thin air. Every gallon had to be physically transported from Normandy to wherever divisions operated. Patton's Third Army included multiple armoured divisions, plus mechanized infantry, tank destroyers, self-propelled artillery, and support units. Daily fuel consumption during rapid August advances exceeded 400,000 gallons across entire army. This astronomical figure exceeded capacity of Red Ball Express to deliver, particularly given other critical needs for ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The Red Ball trucks themselves consumed significant fuel. Round trip from Normandy to Chartres, approximately 250 miles, required 60 to 70 gallons per truck, depending on load, terrain, and driving style. With nearly 6,000 trucks operating, Red Ball consumed 360,000 to 420,000 gallons daily just to run itself. This created paradox that supplying the supply line consumed almost as much fuel as supplying combat forces. The fuel shortage of late August and early September 1944 sparked one of war's great debates between senior commanders with fundamentally different strategic visions. General Eisenhower, as Supreme Allied Commander, allocated limited supplies according to his broad front strategy. He believed advancing on multiple axes prevented Germans from concentrating reserves against any single thrust, while maintaining flexibility to exploit opportunities wherever they emerged. He gave priority to Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group, advancing through Belgium toward Ruhr Industrial Region, Germany's industrial heartland, whose capture would cripple German war economy. Patton fumed that politics and favoritism toward British were crippling his advance at a moment when boldness could have ended war in 1944. He argued, with some justification, that his Third Army had demonstrated superior speed and effectiveness, covering more ground and destroying more enemy forces than any other Allied formation. The truth was more complex than either commander acknowledged. No amount of Red Ball trucks could overcome basic, geographical and physical limitations. Every gallon of fuel came across Normandy beaches and had to travel 200 miles or more to reach forward units operating beyond Paris. The longer advance continued, the more fuel was consumed simply moving supplies forward, creating paradox where success made further success increasingly difficult. The debate raged through September as American forces paused to consolidate gains and rebuild logistics. Engineers performed miracles of reconstruction, restoring rail lines at speeds that seemed impossible. Trains began supplementing trucks, gradually reducing pressure on overtaxed Red Ball routes. The reopening of Antwerp in late November would eventually normalize Allied logistics and end crisis that had threatened to stall entire campaign. But for 83 critical days from August 25th through November 16th, the Red Ball Express represented primary lifeline sustaining American armies advancing across France. Without it, the war in Europe might have continued well into 1946. On November 16th, 1944, Red Ball Express officially ended operations. Rail transport had been restored across much of France. Pipeline systems began delivering fuel directly from ports to forward areas. Port of Antwerp, fully cleared of mines and operational, provided deep water capacity needed to supply multiple armies. The truck convoys became obsolete for long-distance hauling, though trucking remained essential for final delivery to combat units. The statistics of the operation documented unprecedented logistical achievement that exceeded all expectations. Over 500 camps across 45 states had trained personnel involved. 175 main camps, with 325 branch camps, provided organizational structure and replacement personnel. The Express operated 5,958 vehicles at peak capacity. It transported 12,500 tons daily at maximum achieved on August 29. Over its lifetime, it moved 412,193 tons. Drivers contributed 14 million man-days of labor under conditions that would have broken lesser men. They wore out 50,000 tires, an average of more than 8 tires per truck, demonstrating punishing conditions under which they operated. The Red Ball Express achieved something German logistics never could, sustaining offensive operations over distances and at speeds that rendered blitzkrieg tactics obsolete when employed against equally mobile opponents. German armoured advances in Poland covered approximately 200 miles in 5 weeks. The advance into France in 1940 covered 250 miles in 6 weeks. Operation Barbarossa saw German spearheads cover 600 miles in 12 weeks before supply problems and Soviet resistance forced pause. These represented impressive achievements against unprepared or inferior opponents. Patton's Third Army covered 400 miles in 4 weeks against prepared German defences, and only stopped because it outran even American logistics capabilities, not because German forces stopped it. The difference was industrial capacity applied intelligently. American factories produced 2.5 million trucks during World War II. Germany produced approximately 300,000, less than 15% of American output. American trucks were standardized, reliable, designed for mass production, and supported by supply chain that could deliver spare parts anywhere. German trucks were diverse, often unreliable, difficult to maintain, and supported by supply chain disrupted by Allied bombing. The arithmetic was brutal and decisive. American production exceeded German production in virtually every military category. In 1944, United States manufactured 96,000 aircraft. Germany manufactured 39,800. America built 17,376 tanks and self-propelled guns. Germany manufactured approximately 9,000. America produced Liberty ship every 42 days on average at peak production, with record being 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. Germany's entire merchant marine construction for entire war totaled approximately 1 million tons. United States built over 53 million tons of merchant shipping, more than 50 times German output. These statistics were not abstract numbers. They represented difference between victory and defeat, between armies that could sustain operations and armies that collapsed under logistical strain. The lessons were not lost on German prisoners who witnessed American logistics firsthand. Captured German officers processed through Allied supply systems watched in amazement as endless streams of vehicles, supplies, and equipment poured across Channel. They saw supply dumps that dwarfed anything Wehrmacht had assembled even during height of German power. They recognized that Germany had lost industrial war before first shot was fired in 1939. The Red Ball Express validated assessment that professionals study logistics while amateurs talk tactics. The most brilliant tactical operation cannot succeed without beans, bullets, and gasoline. The most sophisticated weapons cannot function without fuel and ammunition. The best trained soldiers cannot fight without food and medical supplies. Logistics determine what is possible on battlefield. Everything else is commentary. The German blitzkrieg succeeded brilliantly through tactical innovation and operational excellence against opponents who were unprepared or inferior in training and leadership. It failed ultimately and completely because Germany lacked industrial capacity to sustain those operations against major powers with comparable or superior logistics. Once German forces engaged enemies with resources matching or exceeding their own, Wehrmacht's limitations became fatal weaknesses that no amount of tactical skill could overcome. Battle of Moscow in 1941 failed partially due to logistics, with German supply lines stretched beyond breaking, while Soviet forces operating on interior lines could concentrate reserves. Disaster at Stalingrad in 1942 occurred largely due to supply failures, with German forces surrounded and dependent on inadequate airlift, while Soviet forces methodically tightened noose. Defeat in North Africa happened because Rommel could never get adequate fuel and ammunition. His brilliant tactical victories meaningless when his tanks sat immobile for lack of gasoline. The collapse in Normandy and France accelerated once Allied logistics began functioning effectively, overwhelming German defensive efforts through sheer material superiority. American truck drivers, 3/4 of them black soldiers facing discrimination at home, demonstrated that democracy could organize better, produce more, and fight harder than fascism. They proved that nation-respecting individual initiative, even imperfectly and incompletely, could outperform one built on rigid hierarchy and racial mythology. They showed that free peoples, properly equipped and led, could accomplish extraordinary things. The African-American soldiers of Red Ball Express served with distinction despite facing racism that denied them combat roles and full equality. Ernest Myers of the 3214th Quartermaster Service Company articulated their motivation with simple clarity. We wanted to make an impression for the people back home. We wanted to show that black men were combat ready. They succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. White soldiers who depended on Red Ball supplies recognized drivers' valor even when broader society refused to grant them equality. An armored division commander praised drivers who delivered gasoline under constant fire with words that acknowledged reality. I would not want their job. They have what it takes. A tank driver with 5th Armored Division stated simple truth: if it was not for Red Ball, we could not have moved. Colonel John Eisenhower, Supreme Commander's son, argued without qualification that without Red Ball truck drivers, advance across France could not have been made. General Patton declared with characteristic bluntness that 2.5-ton truck is our most valuable weapon, more important than tanks or artillery. These statements came from officers in segregated military that officially considered black soldiers unfit for combat roles. The contradiction was not lost on drivers who proved their worth while being denied equality, demonstrated courage while facing discrimination, helped destroy Nazi racial ideology while living under American racial segregation. They understood bitter irony of fighting for freedom abroad while being denied it at home. The Red Ball Express became microcosm of WWII campaign that Pittsburgh Courier, influential black newspaper, had promoted since 1942. Victory over fascism abroad, victory over racism at home. African-American soldiers saw their service as advancing both causes simultaneously, proving through action what words alone could not demonstrate. Success of Red Ball Express made arguments against black military capability impossible to maintain with any credibility, though racism persisted long after war ended. The implications carried far beyond immediate tactical advantage. The operation demonstrated conclusively that American logistics could support sustained offensive operations against any enemy anywhere. It proved that American industry could outproduce any rival, regardless of their supposed efficiency or dedication. It showed that democratic organization could surpass authoritarian efficiency when properly motivated and led. These lessons shaped post-war military doctrine, fundamentally and permanently. United States military became permanently committed to mechanization and robust logistics as foundation of military power. Every subsequent American military operation, from Korea through Vietnam to Gulf Wars and beyond, has emphasized logistics and supply chain dominance as prerequisites for success. Understanding that amateurs study tactics while professionals study logistics became institutional knowledge embedded in military education and doctrine. Red Ball Express validated this principle definitively and irrefutably. The German officer corps, trained to appreciate operational excellence and professional competence, understood clearly what they had witnessed. Captured generals interrogated extensively about Allied capabilities consistently emphasized American logistics as decisive factor that made German victory impossible regardless of tactical or operational success. German tactical skill remained high throughout war. German equipment, particularly tanks and anti-tank guns, often surpassed Allied equivalents in quality. German soldiers fought tenaciously even when defeat was certain, but none of it mattered against enemy that could deliver unlimited supplies to front, replace losses immediately, and sustain operations indefinitely. The Red Ball Express represented something deeper and more significant than tactical logistics. It embodied American industrial democracy in action, translating abstract principles into concrete results. Civilian truck designs adapted for military use demonstrated value of standardization. Workers from diverse backgrounds trained as drivers showed that talent exists everywhere when opportunity is provided. Officers improvised solutions to unprecedented problems, proving that rigid hierarchy inhibits rather than enables excellence. System worked because individuals at every level took initiative, solved problems creatively, and adapted to changing circumstances without waiting for orders from above. This contrasted sharply with German military culture that emphasized obedience, hierarchy, and following orders without question. Wehrmacht emphasized centralized planning with innovation reserved for senior commanders. Lower ranks executed plans meticulously, but did not modify them even when circumstances changed. When unexpected problems emerged, systems struggled to adapt because adaptation required approval from higher authority that might be unavailable or too distant to respond quickly. Red Ball Express thrived on flexibility and improvisation. Drivers ignored regulations when those regulations hindered mission. They removed governors limiting truck speed because getting supplies forward mattered more than following speed limits. They exceeded weight limits because delivering ammunition mattered more than preserving vehicles. They traveled alone rather than in convoys because speed mattered more than following procedures. Officers tolerated and sometimes encouraged this behavior because results mattered more than rules. Military police enforced rules that mattered, particularly absolute priority for Red Ball convoys, while ignoring violations that did not compromise mission. This pragmatic approach succeeded brilliantly where rigid adherence to regulations would have failed. The Red Ball moved more supplies faster than any logistics operation in history to that point. It sustained most rapid sustained advance in modern warfare against prepared opposition. It proved conclusively that democratic systems emphasizing individual initiative could outperform authoritarian ones, emphasizing obedience when properly organized and motivated. In 1985, on 40th anniversary of war's end, surviving Red Ball Express drivers held reunion in Austin, Texas. Over 500 former drivers returned, many bringing families to show them where their contribution to victory had begun. These elderly men, now respected members of their communities, remembered vividly fear, exhaustion, and pride of their service. They had proven themselves under most demanding circumstances. They had demonstrated that Black Americans could perform any mission when given opportunity and proper support. Former Staff Sergeant Ernest Myers, aged 79, delivered remarks that resonated with all present. We drove through night without lights. We drove through enemy territory without weapons. We drove until we could barely stay awake. We did it because we knew our brothers at front needed us. We did it because we wanted to prove what Black Americans could accomplish. We did it because it needed doing. The applause lasted several minutes, washing over Myers in waves of recognition and respect. The magnitude of achievement becomes crystal clear through direct comparison with German capabilities. Entire German military logistics system during Operation Barbarossa, largest military operation in history involving over 3 million men advancing across 2,000-mile front, and consumed more resources to advance 600 miles than Red Ball Express required to sustain advances of 400 miles, while supporting multiple army groups simultaneously operating on much narrower front. Red Ball operated on fraction of frontage with fewer troops, but ton-mile for ton-mile, accounting for distance and tonnage moved, it was exponentially more efficient than anything Wehrmacht accomplished. This efficiency resulted directly from American industrial design, standardization enabling interchangeability of parts, mass production reducing costs and increasing availability, and organizational flexibility, allowing rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. German trucks were excellent vehicles individually, representing high-quality engineering and craftsmanship, but they came in dozens of incompatible types requiring different parts, different maintenance procedures, and different training for operators and mechanics. American trucks were ruthlessly standardized. Every Jimmy used same parts regardless of when or where it was built. Any mechanic trained on Jimmys could repair any Jimmy anywhere. Spare parts were completely interchangeable between vehicles. This mundane reality, boring to discuss but critical in practice, proved decisive in sustained operations. The story of Red Ball Express is ultimately a story of victory through long-term preparation meeting immediate necessity. American industrial capacity did not emerge overnight or by accident. It resulted from decades of investment, infrastructure connecting nation, education, creating skilled workers, manufacturing capability, building factories and supply chains, and technological development improving designs and processes. The trucks that won war were designed before war began. Factories that built them were constructed over decades. Road network that allowed their use was built over generations by federal, state, and local governments. Industrial base that supplied them had developed since late 19th century. When war came, America could surge production dramatically because foundation existed and only required expansion rather than creation from nothing. Germany, despite impressive industrial capacity and justifiable pride in engineering excellence, never built that foundation comprehensively. German industry excelled at quality, but failed at quantity. German logistics excelled at pre-war planning, but failed at wartime adaptation. German military culture excelled at obedience, but failed at initiative. These weaknesses, minor in short campaigns against inferior opponents, proved fatal in extended conflict against comparable powers. Red Ball Express exposed all these weaknesses through direct comparison that made excuses impossible. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.